When you think of the Middle Ages, what comes to mind? Knights in shining armor? Grand castles? Maybe even the plague? It's often called the Dark Ages, a time of stagnation between the fall of Rome and the dawn of the Renaissance. But what if I told you that's a huge misconception? The medieval period was actually a hotbed of innovation, giving us inventions that were so groundbreaking, so fundamental, that we've completely forgotten they were even invented. They're just part of life. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on the forgotten medieval inventions that literally built the modern world. Let's start with something you probably used this morning. The button. Before the 13th century in Europe, people held their clothes together with pins, brooches, or belts. Clothes were either loose and draped or painstakingly laced up. Then, suddenly, in Germany, the buttonhole appeared. This simple slit, combined with a small disc, revolutionized fashion. For the first time, clothing could be tailored to fit the human body perfectly. It led to more complex designs, sleeves that weren't just tubes, and a whole new way of expressing status and style. It seems so small, but the button allowed for a fundamental shift in our relationship with what we wear. Next up, let's talk about seeing the world clearly. Imagine trying to read or do any fine-detailed work once your eyesight started to fade. For most of human history, that was it. Your productive life was cut short. Then, around the year 1290 in Italy, an inventor, whose name is sadly lost to history, had a brilliant idea. He put two convex lenses into a frame made of bone, metal, or leather and perched them on the nose. The first eyeglasses were born. This wasn't just a convenience. It was a societal game changer. It extended the working lives of skilled artisans, scribes, and scholars by decades. Knowledge could be preserved and created by experienced masters for much longer. It's no exaggeration to say that eyeglasses helped fuel the intellectual fire of the coming Renaissance. Now, for an invention that powered a revolution, you've heard of the water wheel, which has ancient origins. But medieval engineers perfected it. They developed the vertical water wheel and, more importantly, the camshaft. It is a simple but genius device, a rod with lobes on it that, as it turns, pushes a lever up and down. By connecting this to a water wheel, you could convert continuous rotary motion into a reciprocal or back and forth motion. This unlocked a whole new world of automation. Suddenly, you could mechanize tasks that had been done by hand for thousands of years. Water-powered mills were used to grind grain, hammer metal in forges, pulp rags for paper, and even saw timber. This was the first real industrial revolution, happening centuries before the one we learn about in school. Let's move from power to time itself. Before the late 13th century, telling time was approximate. Sundials only worked when it was sunny, and water clocks were messy and inaccurate. Then, an anonymous genius created the first mechanical clock. These early clocks were massive iron machines, housed in clock towers, with no faces or hands. They told time by striking a bell to mark the hours for public prayer. The key innovation was the verge escapement. It's a mechanism that controls the release of energy from a falling weight, making the clock tick at a regular interval. For the first time, humanity could precisely measure and regulate time. This led to coordinated work schedules, organized city life, and a completely new, more structured concept of the day. Our entire modern world runs on the descendants of this medieval invention. Okay, let's get a little more agricultural. If you don't have enough food, nothing else matters. Roman-era plows were light and barely scratched the surface of the heavy, clay-rich soils of northern Europe. Farming was incredibly difficult and inefficient. Enter the heavy plow, or the caruca, which became widespread around the 10th century. This beast had a vertical knife called a coulter to slice the sod, a horizontal plowshare to cut the soil underneath, and a mold board to turn the earth over. It required teams of oxen to pull, but it could churn up the fertile northern soils like never before. This led to massive agricultural surpluses, which in turn supported a larger population, the growth of cities, and specialized trades. It literally laid the groundwork for European civilization to flourish. And while we're on the farm, let's not forget the humble wheelbarrow. It seems so obvious, right? Stick a wheel on a box and you can carry more. But for thousands of years, people used two-person litters or just carried things. The first definitive evidence of wheelbarrows in Europe appears in the 13th century. It was a simple, one-wheeled cart that multiplied the carrying capacity of a single worker. It was revolutionary for construction, mining, and farming. It sped up the building of the very cathedrals and castles we associate with the era. Another small invention. Another giant leap in productivity. Let's sail into our next one. The stern-mounted rudder. Ancient ships were steered with a large oar on the side, which was clumsy, especially in rough seas. Around the 12th century, ships in Europe began to be built with a rudder attached directly to the back. This, combined with the earlier adoption of the lateen sail from the Arab world, made ships far more maneuverable. They could sail closer to the wind and be controlled with much greater precision. This naval technology was crucial. It made open ocean travel safer and more reliable, directly enabling the age of discovery a few centuries later. Columbus's ships and all the voyages that followed depended on this medieval steering system. And finally, an invention that literally changed the sound of the world. Polyphonic music notation. For most of history, music was passed down by ear. If you wanted to have multiple people singing different parts at the same time, it was chaotic and difficult to coordinate. Then, in the 11th century, a monk named Guido of Arezzo developed a system of lines and notes, the musical staff. This meant that complex melodies and harmonies could be written down and reproduced accurately by anyone who could read the notation. It allowed for the creation of incredibly intricate choral music, symphonies, and every other form of complex musical work we enjoy today. It transformed music from a fleeting performance into a lasting work of art that could be shared across time and space. So, the next time you button your shirt, put on your glasses, or check the clock, remember the so-called Dark Ages. This period wasn't dark at all. It was lit by sparks of genius innovations that were so successful, so essential, that they became invisible parts of our daily lives. They built the platform upon which our modern world stands. What other forgotten inventions do you think deserve more credit? Let me know down in the comments. Thanks so much for watching. And if you enjoyed this journey back in time, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into history. We'll see you in the next one.